Hello class, this is Mazi and Sala, and this is my predictive analytics final project. And this project will be on employee attrition. So looking at our data sets called employee attrition, we have about 35 columns and over 1,500 data points. Um, we look at various things such as age, attrition, business travel. None of the data in this set was null, meaning none of the data was missing. Which is one of the main reasons why I chose this data set. I wanted to choose a data set that not only one I could relate to, two was in the business world, something that interests me, and of course we are in the MBA program. But also I wanted a data set that had little to no missing values, and this was a very complete data set with no nulls. So looking at the data, we have a variety of variables. As you can see, a lot of them, business travel, departments, education field, they are categorized with numerical values, which keeps data organization efficient and simple. For example, you have departments, values 1 through 3. You have 1 is HR, 2 is R&D, 3 sales. I believe this is a much more digestible way to present the data rather than character values. I believe that numerical values in these instances are very efficient. Of course, you have, looking at the other ones, you do have age is obviously a numerical value. Um, that's a given. Numerical value for salary level, that's a given. As we go into the other variables, um, you have everything else uh, measured in a numerical value. So we have employee count, employee number, uh, environment satisfaction, gender, hourly rate, job involvement, and job role. A lot of these are self-explanatory. Nothing too complicated here. It's just that it's very important to know uh, what each number means. For example, job role. You have various job roles indicated by a different variable. It's important that we know what those variables and what those numbers represent. So, for example, if I see 6, I know that's a research director. And more of the different variables. A lot of this is self-explanatory. Nothing out of the ordinary here. A lot of these also are binary response variables. So over 18, for example, 1 is yes, 2 is no. One of the things that we're measuring, attrition, yes or no. So again, some more data exploration. You can take a moment to review. Very, very complete and thorough data sets, measuring a lot of different things. We are very pleased with this data set that we chose. So, with all this data from a company representing its employees, I have a hypothesis. My hypothesis is that distance from home to work contributes to high employee attrition. Why did I choose this hypothesis? So, throughout my adult working life, I have had the experience of driving at least 45 minutes, sometimes much longer, one way to work, and that's without traffic. This has burned me out over time. Sitting in the car, you get physically, it can become painful over time. Uh, Mentally and emotionally, it can be stressful, especially coming home from work. So I wanted to test and see whether or not that uh, the distance from home variable, whether or not that contributed to high employee attrition. It's something that I experience in my real life, and not that I've ever left the company because of the work commute, but I just wanted to see if others uh, could relate and whether that relation could contribute to high employee attrition. and it can be measurable in a data set. After that, picking my hypothesis for pure anecdotal reasons, I did find that there have been studies done on this. One of the more prominent studies is actually in the Harvard Business Review. So we can go ahead and look at that study and draw some reasoning for why this should be looked at. So looking for trends. So when looking at my hypothesis, we want to also be aware of the other variables, such as gender, marital status, job satisfaction, years at a company. These various variables are also going to attribute to attrition, and we want to see, how it compares to the distance from work from home. So we want to look at various things and not just focus on one thing. So before we get started into the models, we want to make sure that we know what attrition is, because not everybody may be familiar with what it is. So attrition attrition in business describes a gradual but deliberate reduction in staff numbers that occur as employees retire or resign and are not replaced. So this is the Investopedia definition. And a lot of times attrition can be confused with turnover. So let's clarify the differences between the two. Attrition is anytime an employee leaves a company voluntarily, positions are usually left unfilled, and it's a great way to reduce staff without layoffs if that's what the company wants to do, if that's a goal, reduce payroll, cut costs. It's a great way rather than laying off an entire department or, various employees across many departments. Where the employee is usually terminated, abandons his job, resigns, or is discharged, and that employee's position is usually filled as soon as possible. When looking at employee frequency, or attrition frequency rather, I'm sorry, we can see in this data set among these employees, there is not a high level of attrition. A little bit under 250 employees have been marked as yes for attrition. So overall, the sample size is not that large to begin with, but this is positive as this company does not experience a lot of attrition. But even with the small pool, the small population of the attrition equals yes, we do want to explore that and explore the hypothesis in more detail. So for our first model, the decision tree. When running the decision tree model, my response variable was attrition, and the predictors were distance from home, age, job satisfaction, training time last year, years in current role, gender, marital status, performance rating, years with current manager, job level, education, and hourly rate. So obviously you can see my first predictor was distance from home. We wanted to measure that first because that directly relates to the hypothesis. But as discussed in the earlier trends slide, we also wanted to look at other things. So if we look at the decision tree, they used all of our observations, 1,470 observations, when analyzing the decision tree. We see that our model has a Yoden of 31.66%, which is the vertical distance from the uninformative diagonal shown on the rock chart. The Yoden score of 31.66% may be on the lower side as it's under 50%. So the closer we get to 50%, the more effective the model is. But just because a Yoden score is on the lower side, it does not mean that the results of the model are statistically insignificant. We want to remember that. Um, of course, we always want to try to do different things to make the model better, test different things, but in this case, the model showed a yielding of 31.66%. So looking at the low misclassifications in this data means it's free from error for the most part. The misclassification model ran off our decision tree shows a frequency of 186 false negatives. When we lower the prediction cuts to 15%, our model improves to 72 false negatives, which is a 61.3% drop in our false negatives. And also, if we look, the number of false positives rather for attrition does not increase significantly. Looking at the different nodes, we wanted to single in on node 1 and node 13. So node 1 indicates that distance from home is not that significant in this particular model, in this particular node, was showing almost 90% no attrition. Okay. Node 13 shows the highest attrition among employees under the age of 33, and they are either married or single. Other variables included years with current manager and job level. So looking at this, we can see that our hypothesis is not really supported by this decision tree node, node 1. We want to go ahead and be very transparent um, about our models and what they show to have integrity in our hypothesis as well as our data exploration and study and the running of our models. Variable importance shows that the distance from home was almost dead last in predicting for attrition. Okay, so while it is statistically insignificant, we can see here it's has an importance rate of 2.86%. All right, that's compared to the first thing, job level, that came in 17.96%. Okay, um, so when comparing distance from home among other variables, such as job level, years with current manager, age, we see that while it is dead last, there are many other things, such as education, gender, hourly rate, job satisfaction, performance rating, and training time last year that we may have contributed to employee attrition, but it did not. Okay, so while our employee distance from home employee attrition importance variable is 2.86%. Okay, it's very minuscule. It, it it at least stacks with other variable importance statistics that were not shown in some other things that we thought maybe could contribute, such as job satisfaction, particularly, and training time last year. So the I-square chart shows us the majority of the nodes, or most of the rectangles in the I-square plot are green, meaning the majority level shows no attrition. Well, this makes sense because the majority of the population responds no for attrition. So the population for attrition, like we spoke earlier, is pretty small. Um, but we do not see that this decision tree model showing a strong connection between distance from home and compared to the other models, other variables rather, when looking at employee attrition. The next model that we ran was logistic regression model. So when running the logistic regression model, my response variable was attrition, with my continuous effects being distance from home, age, training time last year, years in current role, years at company, job satisfaction, job level, education. Classification roles included gender and marital status. Our R squared was at 9.6%. Our Yoden was at 36.59% with a misclassification rate of 15.71%. So again, we always want to try to have a Yoden above 50%. Our R square is kind of low as well. Um, we want to also have that increased, and misclassification rate, of course, uh, is at 15.71%, which is not the worst in the world, but we also would like to see that lower as well. So looking at the logistics regression model fit summary, we can see that distance from home is the fourth strongest variable when measured against attrition. Similar to the decision tree model, there are variables that are much more strongly correlated to attrition than distance from home, such as marital status, job satisfaction, and years of current role. When looking at the cumulative fit, we can see that our model fits the best around the 60% mark and truly gets closest at 80% before merging between 85 and 100%. Um, we always want to compare our model to the best fit model to see how our model gauges against the best possible outcomes and random selection of data. So our conclusion. When looking at our hypothesis at face value, we can say that the distance from home to work contributes to employee attrition, but it was not as big of a factor as we predicted or we had hoped for. Our model showed strength and appeared to be correct. When running the models, we can see that distance from work to home is indeed a factor, but it is not as important as previously thought. Instead, marital status, job satisfaction, and years in current role are all more significant than distance from home uh, when you look at the logistic regression model. And even if the decision tree did not support our hypothesis strongly either. Distance from home to work is the sixth and last variable when looking at variable importance in our decision tree model. So overall, we can say that while we had hoped for a stronger connection, the stronger connection was not there once we ran the data, um, but it was not statistically insignificant when compared to some other variables as well. So we want to point that out. It may not have been number one, um, but there were some variables that just had no statistical significance at all when uh, when looking at employee attrition. So it was a factor, just a lot smaller than we had hoped. Uh, Conclusion: business recommendations. So we can confidently make the following recommendations to the business whose data this is in regards to lowering employee attrition. So we can invest more in the employee experience. We saw a low, or rather uh, high significance and correlation between job satisfaction, years in current role, um, in employee attrition. Also, we can focus on mentorship and career path planning. Okay, when looking also years with current manager, years in current role, empower your employees. So age was also a factor. I think it was node uh, 13. It said employees under the age of 33. So empowering our younger employees to make decisions, to really grab hold of their work, I think can go a long way in reducing employee attrition and stopping an exodus of employees leaving a company. Last, uh, directly related to our original hypothesis, offer work from home opportunities. So, like we said, even though the distance from work from home was not as statistically significant in predicting attrition as we had hoped, it was still a factor, a smaller factor, but still a factor. And maybe offering some work from home opportunities 2 to 3 days a week would help an employee uh, not get so burned out and stressed from long distances from work. These are the links to the different models that we ran, the two models, the logistic regression and decision tree. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my presentation and review my project. Uh, this has been a rewarding experience in this class, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.